facing challenges that are going on during this time. And Zechariah is prophesying to these people because obviously they think now is the time that the Messiah is going to come. And Zechariah is telling them, well, are y'all ready for the Messiah to come? Are y'all the kind of people that could be faithful to God? You know, can y'all abstain from idols and pride and such things that led to the fall of the people before you of this nation? And Zechariah is a really, there we go. So that's what we got to cover, all of that, which I doubt we will, 10 through 14. But in Zechariah, the way it kind of works, he gets these visions. There's like 9 visions in there. 6 of them kind of parallel, and then 2 of them explain each other, and then you get one that kind of ties them all together, and then it just goes into another part. But I'm going to try to stay on track, and we're just going to point out the messianic prophecies that Zechariah would mention in these visions that he would get. We're going to start in Zechariah 6, 12 through 13. So Zechariah 6 it's one of those visions, and you might have studied this in a past class. It's kind of difficult the way it starts out. You get this vision of these 4 chariots pulled by 4 different color horses, and Zechariah doesn't even understand what he's looking at, and he asks the angel of the Lord, he says, explain this to me. And basically what the angel explains to him, that these 4 chariots pulled by these 4 different color sets of horses was the Lord's Spirit going out into all the land, into the north, into the south, and dealing with these evil kingdoms such as Babylon and Persia, and dealing with these evil kingdoms that the Lord had used throughout this period of time to discipline nations. And I touched on this just a little bit. If you ever want to do a study, because when we get to Zechariah 9, we'll talk about it there, of just our God, our King that we serve, is forever in control of all the things that are happening around us. You know, you can get, I've got an in particular friend of mine, he's an older guy, and all he does is sit around all the time and watch Fox News. And every time I call him and I talk to him, he's worried about something that's going on in the world. Oh, did you see what's going on over there in Palestine? Did you hear Russia did this? And I tell him, I was like, man, I sure am glad I don't have to worry like you do. I said, because my king's been running these nations since the beginning of time, using them to how he wants them to do and to accomplish certain goals that he wants them to accomplish. I'm not worried about it. And if there's ever a book that really just shows, well, there's a lot of them, but this one in particular that really just shows God using the nations, and when he's done with them, these sinful nations, being done with them and using someone else to accomplish what he wants to accomplish, Zechariah is a great study for that. So, and that's what the point was of these chariots with these 4 different color sets of horses that were going out. God was revealing to the people, you're back. I told you I was going to take care of you. I'm going to. He said, there is a time coming that I am going to bring the Messiah about. And all these evil nations, I'm dealing with them. That's not for y'all to worry about. Y'all worry about doing what's right by me. Staying held tight to this covenant, and let me worry about the world. And I can't help but get a little preachy on that. I would love to do a sermon on that. That's us. Our job is right here and each other. And to worry about the work that's set before us and staying right with God. The things that go on in that world, don't get caught up in that. In amongst that, we get this messianic prophecy. Zechariah 6, starting in verse 12. Then speak to him, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, saying, behold, the man whose name is Branch. From his place he shall branch out, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Yes, he shall build the temple of the Lord. Anytime the Bible repeats itself, pay attention. That was repeated twice, this idea of the temple of the Lord. He shall bear the glory and shall sit and rule on his throne. So he shall be a priest on his throne. And the counsel of peace shall be between them both. So in this particular vision, there was this idea of Joshua, the high priest, receiving a crown and being a king and a priest. And we know that would have been a completely foreign idea. I mean, we can all remember the tragedy of Uzziah when he tried to be a king and a priest, and then the Israelite people were warned to keep your religious leader and your political leader separate. But you get this vision that there's coming Messiah, this branch that would be a king and a priest. And if you look at this in the first part, it says, "Behold the man whose name is Branch." If you remember back to some of the other prophecies that we went through, this term branch, this label branch for this coming Messiah, it's very familiar. Actually, in Zechariah, we didn't study this, but Zechariah 3:8, he would refer to this coming Messiah as this branch. Isaiah 4:2, I don't have time to read through them, but if you want to take these notes, these are all references back to this Messiah being called the branch. And what's meant by that is just this idea of a fruitful person, a fruitful Messiah, someone that was going to have a very productive ministry. I can't help but think of John 15 and verse 5, obviously, when Jesus was referring to himself to his disciples, and he says, "I am the vine and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing." I mean, Jesus identifies himself here as that he is the vine, the branch. I go back to Romans, where we're talking about being grafted into the same root, where you can take so many different peoples from so many different areas, this idea of bringing in all different people in all different nations and all of them pulling their strength from one thing, and that would be our King. That would be Jesus, this Messiah. Moving on in that, the next thing you come to is at the beginning of that where he says, "Behold the man." I would put your attention on this a little bit. It's interesting that, and this is me here. I kind of put this together because I just find it so interesting. Behold the man, in the Hebrew text, this prophecy begins with the same words that Pilate would use when referring to Jesus when he would present him to the Jews before crucifixion. John 19:5, so Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe, and Pilate would say, "Behold the man." Now, the contrast to this is Jeremiah is obviously talking about behold the man in the glory, but I think one thing you can pull away from this phrase of behold the man is the humanity of Jesus. Never forget that God became man. And this is how human he was. How human that Zechariah in his prophecy would say, "Behold this man, a man just like us." God would become man. From his place he shall branch out. This speaks of the fruitfulness of Jesus. This speaks of once his ministry would start, it would take off, and from such a lowly place. You remember when we got into Isaiah 53 and he was referred to as a root out of dry ground? There would be nothing behind him, that Jesus' ministry would take off from such a basic and humble first start, and from nothing, the Lord would make something out of it, would make a great movement. And he says that from this great movement, from the fact that this branch was going to be so fruitful and it was going to branch out, it says, "And he shall build his temple of the Lord," and repeated it twice. You know, I was always told when the Bible repeats itself, pay attention. And twice there's this talk about this temple that he would build, this new temple where he would dwell in. Ephesians 2:19 through 20. I hope you can read that. There was a lot I was trying to get up there. I couldn't help but go to this particular scripture here. So, "Then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God." And here's the main part. And I underlined some of this, so if you're following around and you want to highlight it back to Zechariah 6, you can. "Built on a foundation of apostles and prophets, Christ himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole structure being joined together grows in a holy temple in the Lord. In him you are being built together in a dwelling place for God by the Spirit." This is that temple. What we are right now is that temple that Jesus was set to build. This is the New Jerusalem, the holy place where God dwells. It's made up of us, this church. 1 Peter 2 and 5 to the same point. You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And then the very last part, so he shall be a priest on his throne. That is a completely unthinkable concept to these Israelites during this time. If it's 2 Chronicles 26, you get that story of Uzziah, the king that tried to be a priest, and what a failure that was. And this just goes again to the idea of this new covenant, like we talked about in Jeremiah 31. A king and a priest couldn't be the same person under the old covenant, but under a new covenant with a perfect king and a perfect priest, this could be something that would be possible. Okay, any questions? I breezed through that one kind of quick, but I've got a goal. I've got a goal to make Bruce proud and hit all my scriptures this morning. Zechariah 9:9. I really want to talk a lot about Zechariah 9. So I did too much studying on this one. The vision that's given at the beginning of Zechariah 9 is pretty much laying out the conquest of Alexander the Great and how he would conquer all through Tyre, a place that Babylon couldn't conquer. Multiple other world powers had tried to conquer this Tyre kingdom, which Alexander the Great would do it easily, and how he would conquer everything coming around but would leave Jerusalem. And I'd love to go into that, but we can't. We got to focus on the messianic portion of it. But Zechariah pretty much tells them what's coming, that this wave is coming through in this prophecy in chapter 9. The part that I want to pull out of it is Zechariah 9 and 10. And I separated it because there's 2 points to be made. But at this point in Zechariah, as we go on, it gets inspiringly detailed. And have you noticed as we went through these messianic prophecies, how this story of this coming Messiah and what he was going to do would get detailed even more and more? I mean, as we've went all the way up to the point of Zechariah, all through Isaiah, it gets so detailed. The story just unfolds in front of you. I used to say, Tim is the one that mentioned this, and then I stole it like I do. Ryan, I'll be stealing a bunch of your stuff. If I hear something I like, I take it and reuse it. That's what I do. And Tim had one, remember the fifth gospel, Isaiah. Well, I've reframed that. As I study Bible, my horizons expand. And so now I think the fifth gospel is the Old Testament. I really do at this point. Because it's basically a story of how God was going to save the world through this Messiah. And when you get to Zechariah and Hosea and Micah, these minor prophets that are coming close to the time when we're fixing to bring in the Messiah, the details just amaze me. You know, this was one of them studies where I had to stop and pray and was just like, wow, what great evidence. So Zechariah 9 and verse 9, in amongst this prophecy of basically the conquest of Alexander the Great, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. Well, you know where all we're going with that, but the idea that this would be predicted this many years, what is it, about 400 years? Yeah, I guess. So I'm happy with that. If I can get within 100, that's good. But the fact that this would be prophesied 500 years before the Messiah was to come was absolutely amazing. And not only that, this is such a detailed prophecy. I can't help but think if I would have been a Pharisee, and obviously a Pharisee, most of them must have been really greedy people, because the stuff that we're fixing to look at in Zechariah would have been something that they would have studied. And it's like, oh, here's this guy riding on this donkey, you know, or here's these 30 pieces of silver that were thrown back into the temple, just as Zechariah predicted. some of these things might have threw flags off in my mind, and like, well, these are just too many things that are lining up. Maybe I need to look at this Jesus. And it does amaze me that they couldn't pick up on some of this, or some of this wouldn't have set off flags in their mind for as much time as they would have spent in the Old Testament. Behold, your king is coming to you, lowly and riding on a donkey. This would have been a customary mount in representation for a king coming into a city representing peace. And there's a whole lot into the fact that Jesus rode in on a donkey. This idea of not riding in like a warring general on a stampeding steed and showing off. And if you think about it, when Jesus had the triumphal entry, and let me put that up there for you. I can't see that, so I'll probably have to read it from my Bible, but we all know the story. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead, and he said there'd be a colt of a donkey, and they untied the donkey, and Jesus rode in to fulfill what was said here in the prophecy. And this idea of him riding in on a donkey, this lowly, humble way to enter, this idea of being this king that would lower himself and show this idea of humility. I had two sayings here that I got from Charles Spurgeon. I was going to read to you. I thought they were good. The first one, brethren, let us be lowly. Did I hear one say, well, I will try to be lowly. You cannot do it in that way. We must not try to act the lowly part, but we must be lowly. And then when we shall naturally act in a humble manner, it's astonishing how much of the pride there is in the most modest. Can y'all think of people that take a lot of pride in their modesty and a lot of pride in their humility? Where I work, we got this chaplain service. It's a lot of military guys in our upper management, so they do a lot of things like they do in the military, which doesn't work in the civilian world, by the way, at all. It works in the military, but not in the civilian world. But we got these chaplains that go around. They put one at every branch, and they are the most proud to be humble people you've ever met. Oh, they are going to brag about the good deeds they did. And I find it so inspiring, the humility that Jesus took, and which, of course, points me right to the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus would deliver one of the most powerful sermons. What was the very first qualification for kingdom citizens in the Beatitudes? You got to let go of your pride. Well, what's one of the first things that in Proverbs that it says God hates? Haughty eyes, a prideful person. Was there any pride in Jesus? Did he have the ability to be prideful? Absolutely. I mean, if anybody deserved to be proud, it would be him. And the example shown here by Jesus, riding in on this donkey, this colt or this foal, this outward sign of humility and peace that Jesus was going to bring, it's not just astonishing that it was prophesied 500 years before it happened in Zechariah, but the fact that it happened in the example it showed for us. Our King would come in with all humility, bringing peace, and that should be our same. I've got a good commentary here from Lloyd. If you ever mention your humility, you don't have any. That's Mark Lloyd. If you ever mention your humility, you don't have any. Work on your humility. A colt or a donkey, the importance of the type of animal that Jesus rode in on, I'll just touch on this a little bit because I'm already running out of time. You remember in Deuteronomy 17 when Moses was given this instruction to the Israelite people as they were fixing to cross into the Jordan, and he knew he wasn't going to make it, so he gives this inspired, wonderful last will and testament. Remember, he starts talking about a king. He says, don't go get a king. Don't be like the nations around you. You need to let God be your king. You have a king. He says, but I know you will. And he gave that warning. It's Deuteronomy 17, 16 through 17, and he said, only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never again return that way. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And there was this idea of the kings of Israel. When you do to get a king, is what Moses said. He said, you're not going to be able to stand it. I'm predicting that you're going to want a king like the people around you. And when you do get a king, he needs to be modest. He needs to be a king. He doesn't need to acquire for himself all these horses and build up these riches and have excessive wives. That'll cause problems. And, I mean, that explains a bunch of the kings, doesn't it? Solomon in particular, that was his downfall. And it was a warning that any king that strayed away from this pattern. And isn't it interesting that Jesus rides in with humility on a donkey, looking like this king that Moses said you should have? This humble king, this idea of riding in on a donkey. All right. I'm not going to take any comments because I'm going to keep going. Zechariah 9 and 10. Or Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 10. So continuing on, this is the same passage. I just separated it out because it was easier for me to break it out. The strength and authority of the Messiah's reign. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem. The battle bow shall be cut off. He shall speak peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Now this is continuing on with this humble king riding in on a donkey, this king who brings peace and humility, and he says that he'll cut off the chariots from Ephraim and the horse to Jerusalem. The battle bow will be cut off. This is the same idea that we've heard repeated over and over and over again throughout all these prophecies. Remember this, they'll beat their swords into plowshares, they'll beat their spears into pruning hooks, that the lamb was going to lay down with the wolf and the goat with the leopard. Remember all these ideas of once violent men that become peaceful in this kingdom? That this king that was coming was going to bring a message that was so powerful that it would take people that would be violent and they would lie with and work with and study with people that were of a different nature. That this kingdom and this word and this gospel was going to be so powerful and so inspired with such a good ruler that there was this whole idea of this peaceful kingdom, which, I mean, we get to live it now. Look at each and every one of us and how different. A lot of us are very different. You get into these churches, we come from all different walks of life and have different hobbies and different jobs and different views on things. But the one thing we all come to terms on, the one thing that we find common ground and a common love is Jesus and the message and being a citizen of this kingdom, which unites us closer. I mean, you think about this when you're out in public. What's your reaction when you see somebody you go to church with? Versus somebody you went to school with. I see somebody I went to high school with, and we might have been buddies and got in all kinds of trouble together. And I see them, and it's just like, hey, man, how you doing? How's your kids? Oh, but if I see one of y'all, after this, when I go out to eat, if I see one of y'all at a table, I'm not leaving that restaurant till I come see you. That's the idea of this new kingdom. This new kingdom was so radically different, which one of the whole themes in Zechariah is this idea of the leaders that were coming were going to mistreat the people. And when we get into the last 4 chapters, Isaiah actually acts out his prophecy representing these shepherds over Jerusalem and the mistreatment they would have, but not with this shepherd. He's saying that he'll cut off the horses, the battle horses basically, from Ephraim, which would have been Israel, the northern kingdom, and Jerusalem, the southern kingdom, Judah, and the battle bow will be cut off. There's not going to be no need for war. There's not going to be no violence in this new kingdom. And he'll speak peace to the nations. I stuck this scripture. We went through this earlier on. He shall judge between the nations, is Isaiah 2:4. And he shall decide disputes for many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. This is the same message repeated over and over and over again. And I would ask you, why does it seem so familiar, this same message repeated over and over in all these prophecies? Well, might I suggest it's coming from the same author. The author of our salvation is the same author that used these men to produce the same message over and over and over. And if that isn't inspiring, I mean, that gets me excited. Just knowing that this is the way God works. And the same message was produced all through prophecy, and it developed as it went on to the point to where we are at now. All right, moving on. I'm going to jump into Zechariah 10. So the last part of what I wanted to go through was Zechariah 10 through 14. So the first, Zechariah 1 through 9, is those visions that he got when he was asleep, and it's talking about the restoration of the temple and the restoration of the land, and these leaders being the type of leaders they needed to be. And it kind of just cuts off after chapter 9. Well, when you start into chapter 10 through 14, he's actually acting out these prophecies, this warning that he's given. And I tell you, if you find yourself in a position of leadership, there's a great study in 10 through 14 where Zechariah acts out these prophecies. There's a great study in there of leadership and what God expects from a leader and where these leaders would fall short. When you get into Zechariah 10, I just picked out verse 4. So he's given this, he's acting out this shepherd's type life he's living to show what a leader would be. And in here he says, from him shall come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, and from him every ruler, all of them together. I mean, it's obviously, we're pointing back to 1 Peter 2, 4, and 5, where we're talking about this cornerstone. We've already read through this one time where it says that we are living cornerstones and that Jesus would be that cornerstone that the temple would be built on. The idea of the tent peg would be that Jesus holds all things together securely. Through this new Messiah that was coming, he was like, look, the instability that we have now, when the new Messiah comes, there will be stability. He'll be this cornerstone. He'll be this tent peg. He'll be this battle bow. When it comes to, like I was talking about earlier in this class about my friend that watches Fox News all day and then just freaks out about what's going on in the nation, and we don't have to do that. That's because Jesus is our battle bow. We follow our king. We serve our God. I'm not worried about what other kings and other nations and other rulers are doing. I have a king. I have a king and a high priest that has proven time and time again throughout the scriptures that he'll deal with this world. It's his to deal with. I would point your directions. I didn't put this up there, but to John's Revelation, chapter 19 and verse 16. On his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And that's it. The prophet Zechariah is telling the people here, there's one coming. You worry about these improper leaders that you got right now, but don't worry. When the Messiah gets here, when the branch gets here, he'll be the perfect leader. And his kingdom, his temple will be everlasting. Okay. Zechariah 11, 12 through 14. This one's really, really neat. This one, I'm glad I got to this one. I got 3 minutes. Then I said to them, if it is agreeable to you. Now, he's acting out this idea of a shepherd, and he's going to get his wages. This is kind of an odd prophecy. Robert or Tim probably should have did this class. They could have did it a lot better than me. Then I said to them, if it is agreeable with you, give me my wages, and if not, refrain. So they weighed out for my wages 30 pieces of silver, and the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter. And that princely price they set on me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord for the potter. Now, that's kind of incredible, ain't it? I mean, this is obviously talking about the night that Jesus was betrayed. And Matthew 26 and 15, where it was spoken that these things happened so that it would fulfill what was said by the prophet. But it's pretty impressive that it's predicted to the point that where Judas threw it back into the temple. It even gives reference to that. If I would have been the high priest, I always put myself in the position of the wrong side because I'm normally on the wrong side of everything. If I would have been the high priest that would have been standing there when Judas threw the 30 pieces back in, after he rode in on a donkey, and after all the other, I would have had a hard time probably. But the 30 pieces of silver, did you know that that was the lowest price you could pay for a slave under Jewish law? Was 30 pieces of silver? Did you know that Jesus was betrayed for the lowest price you could pay for a slave? And the potter's field, we all know that that's where Judas ended up. Thank you. This has been a great study. I recommend all of y'all keep this, go through, study this for yourself, and take advantage of the advantage that Kent, Matt, and myself had of getting to do this study.
Son of my soul, thou Savior dear, it is not night if thou be near. O may no earth-born cloud arise to hide thee from thy servant.